The water was running when Marcus got home, and for a moment, he stood frozen in his hallway, his daughter Emma's hand clutched tight in his own. His heart hammered against his ribs as steam curled from beneath the bathroom door. Someone was in his house. Someone was using his shower. Every instinct screamed at him to grab Emma and run, but this was his home, the only sanctuary he'd managed to build for his little girl after her mother left them 2 years ago. Marcus had learned to be careful, to lock doors twice, to check windows before bed. He'd learned that the world could be cruel and unpredictable, especially to a single father working double shifts at the hospital just to keep the lights on. He pressed Emma behind him and slowly pushed open the bathroom door, his phone ready to dial 911. What he saw stopped him cold. A young woman stood in his shower, fully clothed, dirt streaming off her jacket and jeans, mixing with tears that she couldn't hide even under the spray of water. She looked up at him with hollow, terrified eyes, the kind of eyes Marcus had seen too many times in the emergency room. Eyes that had witnessed something unspeakable. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the running water. "Please don't call the police. I couldn't." Her words dissolved into sobs. Marcus should have been angry. He should have demanded answers, called the authorities, protected his daughter from this stranger who'd broken into their home. But something in those eyes stopped him. Maybe it was his years as an ER nurse, seeing people at their absolute worst. Maybe it was the memory of his own desperation when Sarah left, when he'd felt so alone and broken that he'd sat in his car crying for an hour before going inside to face Emma's questions about where mommy had gone. "Emma, honey," he said softly, keeping his voice steady, "go to your room for a minute, okay? Take your tablet." "But Daddy." "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's okay." Emma hesitated, her curious 6-year-old eyes darting between her father and the crying stranger, but she obeyed. Marcus waited until he heard her bedroom door close before turning back to the woman in his shower. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "But I need you to tell me what's happening." The woman's shoulders shook. She was probably in her mid-20s, with dark hair plastered to her face and bruises blooming purple on her arms. "He's looking for me," she finally said. "My boyfriend, ex-boyfriend. I tried to leave, and he said he'd kill me if I ran. But I had to. Tonight, I had to. I was walking, trying to get to the shelter downtown, and it started raining, and I was so cold, and I saw your window was cracked open, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just needed to feel clean again. Just for a minute." Marcus's professional training kicked in. He recognized the signs, the flinching, the way she held her ribs, the shake in her hands that spoke of adrenaline crash after trauma. "Turn off the water," he said gently. "Let me get you some dry clothes. You're not calling the police. Not unless you want me to." 15 minutes later, she sat at his kitchen table wrapped in Sarah's old bathrobe, the one Marcus had kept meaning to throw away but never did. Her name was Jennifer, and she told her story in fits and starts while Marcus heated up leftover soup and Emma peeked around the corner, her natural compassion overriding her shyness. Jennifer had been trapped for 3 years in a relationship that had slowly strangled her life away. She'd lost her job, her friends, her family's trust. Tonight, when he'd raised his hand again, something inside her had finally broken free. She'd grabbed nothing but her purse and run into the rainy night, knowing the women's shelter closed intake at 9 and she'd missed it by hours. "I used to be somebody," she said, staring into her soup. "I had a degree, plans, dreams, and then I woke up one day and didn't recognize myself anymore." Marcus sat down across from her, pushing the bowl closer. "You're still somebody. That person's still in there. Is she?" Jennifer's laugh was bitter. "Because I just broke into a stranger's house and scared his little girl. You did what you needed to survive." Marcus glanced at Emma, who'd crept fully into the room now, holding her favorite stuffed elephant. "We understand that here, don't we, Em?" Emma nodded solemnly. She walked over and placed the elephant on the table in front of Jennifer. "Mr. Snuggles helps when I'm sad. You can hold him." Something cracked in Jennifer's expression. She reached out with shaking hands and took the worn elephant, clutching it like a lifeline. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different, softer somehow, touched with something that might have been hope. Marcus made a decision then. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe it was foolish. But he'd spent too many nights in this house feeling the weight of loneliness, remembering what it felt like to need help and have nowhere to turn. "The couch is yours tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out the next step. There's a social worker at the hospital who specializes in domestic violence cases. I'll call her first thing. I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." That night, after he'd given Jennifer blankets and locked his bedroom door more out of habit than fear, Marcus lay awake thinking about the strange turns life took. He'd expected to come home to leftover pizza and Emma's math homework. Instead, he'd found someone who needed him, who reminded him that the world was full of people barely holding on, waiting for someone to extend a hand. The next morning, true to his word, Marcus called Karen, the social worker. Within hours, Jennifer had appointments scheduled, emergency housing arranged, and a restraining order being filed. But something had shifted in his house during that long night. Over breakfast, Emma had chattered away to Jennifer about school and her friends, and Jennifer had listened with real attention, even managing to smile. "Why are you doing this?" Jennifer asked as Marcus prepared to drive her to the shelter that would become her temporary home. "You don't know me. I broke into your house." Marcus thought about all the people who'd helped him when Emma was born, when Sarah left, when he'd felt like he was drowning. The neighbor who'd brought casseroles every week. The daycare teacher who'd waived late fees when his shift ran over. The stranger at the grocery store who'd paid for his items when his card was declined, slipping away before he could protest. "Because someone helped me once," he said simply. "And because tomorrow, you're going to help someone else. That's how this works." 3 months later, Marcus received a letter. Jennifer had found a job, started therapy, and moved into her own apartment. She'd reconnected with her sister. She'd enrolled in classes to finish her degree. But more than that, she'd started volunteering at the same women's shelter that had helped her, sitting with frightened women on their first night free, telling them that yes, life could be different. Yes, they were strong enough. Yes, there were still good people in the world. She ended the letter with words that Marcus taped to his refrigerator. "You showed me that even in the darkest moment, humanity shines through. You gave me back my life. And now I'm going to spend the rest of it passing that gift forward. Thank you for seeing a person, not an intruder. Thank you for choosing compassion." Marcus read those words every morning while making Emma's breakfast, and they reminded him of a truth he'd always known but sometimes forgot. That we're all just walking each other home. That one act of kindness can change everything, and that sometimes the most extraordinary thing we can do is simply be human to another human when they need it most. The world felt a little less broken after that night. And every time Marcus turned on his shower, he thought about the stranger who'd stood there crying, and the moment he'd chosen to see her pain instead of his fear. It was the best decision he'd ever made.